All right, good evening. Welcome back to the Conscious Caracal podcast. Tonight, we're going to be talking to a guest that has not been on for a while, but I know a lot of people in my audience will recognize him. He was a regular guest in regards to crime, specifically as a topic here in South Africa. And I thought it's a good time and a relevant time now to have him back on. For those who don't recognize the man on the screen, he is Ian Cameron. He's the National Assembly Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police and a member of the South African Parliament for the DA. He's also an anti-crime activist with many years of experience. Ian, welcome back on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Aaron. It's good to be with you again and look forward to it as well.
Right. And I personally can say I had the pleasure to work alongside you as your colleague during your time at AfriForum. And already that time I could see that you were passionate about fighting crime and solving the problem of crime in South Africa. It wasn't about the money or the prestige or the heroism or being seen as a hero for you. It was about actually finding real solutions to real problems. But even anti-crime activists cannot escape crime. This year, you were the victim of an attempted crime, an attempted hijacking. Not to ask you to go into the small little details, but just for an overview, can you tell the audience what happened to you this year in regards to that?
Yeah, of course. So you're 100% right. On the 19th of August this year, myself and two of my colleagues from Parliament, Nicholas Gottsal, who's in the National Council of Provinces, and Lisa Schikkerling, who is in the National Assembly with me, did an unannounced oversight visit to the Philippi SAPS Training Academy, which is one of the national police training academies. And unfortunately, they have had quite a bit of significant issues regarding corruption or allegations around corruption at the academy. And unfortunately, many of the people that were implicated still serve there. Now, long story short, we did the visit there. And when we left, we had to drop Lisa off at the airport again. And on our way, we had to drive through Philippi East and a part of it called Brown's Farm, which is renowned for significant amounts of violent crime. And while we had left the academy, probably 3 minutes out, if even, a city of Cape Town vehicle parked next to us and signaled to me to lower my window. And he said, "Please be careful." I said, "Thank you." And I mean, I've been working in that area amongst others for the past 5 years, and you're kind of aware of the risks and so on. And then, like literally seconds after that, the same happened with a taxi that stopped on the other side and said, "Hey, you guys need to be careful. Watch out for this place." Which was strange because I'd never been warned before like that. And then suddenly Lisa said that something doesn't feel right to her. And I mean, her words weren't even cold. And the first, let's call it, shot came with a brick on my side, and they hit through the window and continued to try and beat me. You can still see some of the marks on my face where I had stitches. They cracked. They actually broke two of my teeth off and cracked some of the others. And then they started doing the same on Nick's side. Nicholas Gottsal was sitting on my left on the passenger seat. I was the driver. And then they started at the back with Lisa as well. And we were completely boxed in. So it wasn't even at an intersection. We were moving really slowly in traffic and we were boxed in. So we couldn't get away. Nick, like, literally sat forward looking at his hands like this, and the blood was just pouring from his head. He lost consciousness. And at that stage, I didn't know whether he'd been shot and or hit and whether he was dead or not, to be honest. And I realized that if I don't do something properly, or do something that that means something, we may not actually survive. They kept coming, and by about the third or the fourth attempt of him trying to break in on Nick's side, I reached for my firearm and I shot one of the attackers. after which they fled. And they were later on tracked by the police, and it was within hours. The first arrest was made. Not long after that, the second. Unfortunately, the third suspect is still on the loose. They are still actively searching for him, and I'm sure he will get his day. And actually, on the 25th, they are appearing in court again. The two that are in custody. The one that I wounded was wounded in the chest, and he survived it, obviously. And he actually abandoned his bail application on his previous appearance. And we now wait to see what happens in court. I think it would likely be postponed again. I assume that they're still waiting for forensic results, etc. But yeah, it was quite a horrible ordeal. I think what made it also bad was the fact that they didn't throw the bricks and run off, or threw the bricks and check what they could take. They tried to beat us with the bricks. So I think that's what made it really, really bad, is that they just kept coming. Yeah.
But I mean, one small silver lining in it, Ian, is that you can use your experience as proof that nobody is safe from crime in South Africa, no matter whether you are close to government or close to the centers of power, or whether you're just the normal man on the street. Nobody is safe from the scourge, and there needs to be real solutions that need to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes to show that we don't get any special treatment. I think there was a little amount of special treatment after the fact. You can imagine what an indictment it is on South Africa when your police chairperson also gets attacked in an area while actually doing his job. We were literally busy doing our jobs. And I mean, I read some of the let's call it the 2% arm critic comments, where people were saying, but why would you be armed, and so on. But I mean, we go into these places 3-4 times a week easily during oversight periods, and we visit these areas. We walk with the community, etc. So you have to go and face that risk, and we don't have additional protection. I think what makes my specific case slightly unique is the fact that the police have done 2 threat and risk assessments on me, and both they had made findings, and that I was actually meant to have some form of protection. Unfortunately, that hasn't realized yet. But yeah. So, but I mean, all of that is not linked to the oversight work as much as it's actually linked to other threats and risks that were found during the assessment.
And this forms part of a larger crime problem in South Africa. But Ian, for many people on the outside looking in, can you give a little bit of a just brief overview of the crime profile of South Africa? What crimes are of particular severity here? What crimes are some of the crimes that you, as someone, as an anti-crime activist, almost have your hands full the most with? Just a quick overview of South Africa as a country that's being terrorized by crime. What does that crime look like?
Sure, Aaron. So I mean, no, it really is crisis proportions at the moment. We have close to 70 murders per day, and we've got massive other types of crime problems as well. But murder is a very good indicator of your broader crime crisis. If you control murder, generally speaking, you bring other violent crime stats down as well. So obviously, the fact that murder is so high is a very strong indicator of violent crime generally being a crisis in the country. Crimes that are very serious or high in number are sexual offences. Problem with sexual offences is that it's not a good indicator, or they aren't good indicators of the bigger problem, because they are very poorly reported. So I guess to us, we could see it in the way that, wow, the fact that we've got so many already, just in terms of stats, and it's not even a fraction of what reality actually is, because they're so underreported, shows you how big the problem is. But I think the biggest crisis, in terms of all of this. And I'm going to come back to rural safety just now and the different elements of it. But I think the massive crisis that we have at the moment is organized crime. And the reason why I jump to that is if you see organized crime as a bit of an umbrella structure, with certain elements below it, it's kind of become the call it the big boss of violent crime and other types of crime in South Africa, and it's morphed into a structure or a being that is extremely difficult to stop, just because it's developed over many years. It's very, very deep rooted, and it's become like a cancer. Now, the reason why I jumped to that before going through, for example, farm attacks or other rural safety issues, or for that matter, cash in transit heists and ATM bombings, when you go to those very violent crimes, it's very clear that if you analyze, especially ATM bombings and cash in transit heists, it's very much a syndicated type of effort. When you go to rural safety, for example, it has previously been found that people that are involved in a farm attack, for example, may have gained their firearms through other robberies, and they may have performed certain other criminal tasks for other crime bosses. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's one big network. And if you listen to what Frans Cronje said over the last few days, he indicated that it's a very small amount. I think it's a total of 100 prominent criminals that are the reason for the majority of serious crime in Gauteng. Now, I haven't gone and done an in-depth study, but it sounds accurate to me. If you look at Cape Town, for example, and you look at the Western Cape, and you look at gang violence and other types of organized crime, you would likely be able to trace it back to less than 10, big so-called gang bosses that have built a network, and they absolutely flourish. Whereas the state is so far behind in combating this that they literally are haphazardly making arrests sometimes, and sometimes they make good arrests. I mean, in the past few days, they arrested 8 suspects with a whole lot of AK-47s, etc., in Bellville. Unfortunately, today all of those suspects were released again. So it's a counterproductive exercise at the moment. And even though we do see minor successes, the crime picture is very overwhelming at the moment. I must just add, it's a whole mouthful, but I must just add, if you look at the organized crime picture in the country, you would also see that we now rank amongst the top, usually in most of the organized crime categories, within the top 5 or the top 10 globally. Whereas 5 years ago, we were still probably number 18 or 19. Now that is a really significant change in terms of ranking. And the only way that organized crime can function on that level is if you've got really serious state involvement in terms of corruption and organized crime. Organized crime can only be orchestrated properly if government is involved. It's that simple. So yeah, it goes to show, and I'm sure you've seen the book that Jeff Wicks wrote, Shadow State. Jeff can pay me later for marketing his book, but when you read that book, I mean, it's just glaring. It's like I saw a comment last week on X where someone said it's a prophetic precursor for the Madlanga Commission, and it really is, and it actually draws the picture about why we are in the mess that we're in.
And I think that's something that's also very characteristic of crime in South Africa, is where the lines become blurred between, unfortunately, a lot of those connected in the government also being connected to organized crime. And that, unfortunately, is, I can imagine from your side, as someone who's trying to root out crime, is particularly difficult when the ties between the state and organized crime are so deep rooted and are exposed through books like the one that you just mentioned, where if anyone tries to take a stand against a lot of this organized crime, they get taken out, unfortunately.
And that's the reality. I mean, I listed us last week. I spoke at the Certified Fraud Examiners Conference in Joburg, and it was heartwarming to see 1,100 fraud examiners in front of you in that hall and 1,600 online. But it's not so heartwarming when you realize that that number grows every year because of corruption and fraud in South Africa. And when you go and look at the risks and you look at the assassinations, you look at Babita Dukaran, Thomas and Fluta Murray, Bauer van die Kerk, what's interesting about it, whether it's the good or the bad poll, I guess it's a matter of opinion. In some of these cases, you still see these assassinations. So it basically means that regardless of which side you're on, usually in terms of the so-called good guys, they are targeted, but no one is safe anymore to give legal representation to some people, even more so when it comes to liquidators, etc. So no, it's a challenging environment. To me, it's difficult. I guess it's something that still in process. But if you look at the Madlanga Commission and you look at the ad hoc committee that's meant to investigate the things around or the allegations made by General Mkhwanazi, it is really challenging to think what more could we have done, because you're not sure about who you can trust, when you can trust them. Is someone doing it for some kind of a power trip agenda inside the South African Police Service? And you've got a lot of political figures at play. Today in the ad hoc committee, for example, we had a situation where they wanted a DA member, Diane Kohler-Barnard, where some members said that she had to recuse herself because she was mentioned by Mkhwanazi. I personally think it's extremely unfair because not only did she not, there was no evidence of any criminal offense that she committed, but just purely, one person's allegation, you can now be judge, jury, and executioner and just remove people. And it sets a very dangerous precedent. And my words to them was, but wait a minute. And actually, in this very book I just showed you, one of the actual ad hoc committee members is implicated, and her husband that passed on is implicated in the Tembisa hospital contract corruption. But she's on the ad hoc committee, and that's okay. So according to them, and so it's a very difficult terrain to navigate. I think the critical thing for me is that one, you never sell your soul, and two, you need to keep your circle small, and if you do those things, if you don't sell your soul and you've got strong faith, and that second part of keeping your circle small, the chances of surviving are better.
Now, Ian, we've already painted quite a bleak picture of South Africa and the crime problems that we face, but are there crime phenomena in South Africa that are actually on the decrease? Are there any examples of types of crime that the people are actually getting a handle on and that are not on the increase that you are aware of?
Yeah, so it depends from province to province and issue to issue. So murder, for example, has actually, and even though it's a minor decrease, it has decreased in the previous few sets of crime stats that we saw. I don't think that decrease was substantial enough for us to continue seeing a decrease. In fact, I think the decline won't be seen in the next release of stats. And if you look at the Western Cape, for example, challenges regarding ill resourcing of the police hasn't helped much. But before I get to that, if you look at, for example, ATM bombings, the fact that SAPS and large parts of the private sector took hands the way they did, you hardly ever hear of ATM bombings anymore. I mean, if you think about it, in the past week, did you hear of any? Whereas, just over 6-7 months ago, you would hear of an ATM bombing almost every single day. And that's because of a good, solid cooperative framework between the private sector and SAPS. So it can be done. And it's the same with cash and transit heists. I mean, here and there in KZN, you might see something pop up now and then. But generally speaking, I mean, when last did you hear or see of a significant cash and transit heist? You don't. And the main reason for that is collaboration with the private sector and the police, where each plays their important part and they can fulfill a purpose. And that's the reason, and I know it's close to your heart as well, but that's my argument with the farm attack issue, that if we don't change our approach to say how can we collaborate, how can we give more people in rural areas peace officer status or make them reservists, or use, call it reserve private security structures, and obviously community structures too, to your benefit, we can actually change it. We can make that impact. So it's rather a question of political will. I wish I had a magic operational wand, but I don't. So it is frustrating sometimes. But there's so much that can be done. So those are two very simple examples. I think, and those are very current. I mean, that is a success at the moment. Something in Gauteng that has made a massive impact in parts of Gauteng is the E2 project, which is the absolute collaboration where all private security and law enforcement have a central network, communication network, and everyone collaborates, whether reactive or proactive. And I personally think that's very, very positive, and it's a blueprint that could potentially be used in all the different areas. So yeah, just a few good positive examples.
Right. So already I hear two very clear solutions that have shown that they work, and that is firstly increased cooperation between the private sector, private security, and the police, and then secondly increased cooperation between community safety structures and the police. Is there any other strategies that you'd add that also have proven to work, or approaches that have proven to work alongside increased cooperation of the like that you've described now?
Yeah, so to me, one of the critical ones remains community safety structures. Neighborhood watches and farm watches remain the backbone of community safety, regardless if SAPS cooperates or not. Obviously, it is really helpful if SAPS do actually cooperate and work with the different structures. But community safety structures is an absolute must-have in almost any area in the country. I can honestly say that in extremely violent areas in the Cape Flats, for example, and I say that because I think it can be compared to any different community throughout the country, that if they are able to reduce certain kinds of violent crime just through being visible in their neighborhood watches, and it's literally a group of unarmed women usually that patrol the areas, then there is a recipe to share with how successful community safety initiatives can be if they are done correctly. I think that if we look at a local government level, and this is biased because it's the political party that I belong to, I guess, so people can criticize me all they want for it. But just in a sense of Cape Town specifically, if you look at the niche outside of the mandate of the municipality that they filled in terms of law enforcement, they've actually already gone and done what SAPS should have done a very, very long time ago with regards to uniform members. And they've created specialized capacity that makes a massive impact in the fight against violent criminals in and around Cape Town. The problem is that they can't investigate because that mandate is still stuck with SAPS. And I guess that's a discussion for another day. But the point is that, these types of structures, at least for now, reactively, and to a certain extent, I guess, proactively, do make a big impact. But the backbone remains community safety structures.
Now, you've covered specifically what works and what has proven to work, but what are some of the crime fighting myths that you've encountered over the years? Things that you hear from people who have no experience in actually reducing crime, but they cling on to these ideas. This is how you solve the crime problems. But in your experience, these ideas have clearly not worked. Just some examples that come to mind.
Sure. So, I think the one is one that almost all of us are currently guilty of, and the first one is that we are so interested in the policing side of things that we forget about court. So everyone wants to be there for the arrest, and they want to celebrate it and share the pictures on the WhatsApp group, and every patroller has a new bulletproof vest, and I love all the tactical things myself. I mean, it's very cool and everything, but you need to understand how to complete the circle. Or if, for example, someone becomes eligible for parole, what role can a community safety structure play to stop that if they don't want that person to return to that community? So there are many different examples of that specific part. Another thing, and I guess most of it comes down to the community safety or community safety structure side, is the perception of how can I put it, looking too aggressive. So there's a very important uh, principle of dominating your area. If you're a community safety structure, you need to have eyes and ears everywhere. You need to be extremely visible. You want to be bright. People need to know that you control the area, and that's important. That's good. But what I've seen many a time is that some community safety structures actually expose themselves, or they put themselves in unnecessary danger when they walk around with open firearms, for example, or they start interrogating people, and apart from not necessarily being allowed to do that, they would record it, or there are many different examples, but I think a lot of the times they kind of play in the hands of their detractors, and it's important that community safety structures know what they can and can't do. And I mean, I'm the first person to say that if you patrol in your community and you are able to arm yourself and defend yourself with that firearm, it's a good thing to have that, your license to do that. But that being said, don't give away your advantage. Conceal your firearm. Apart from it being illegal not to, think about it as as the advantage that it holds for you as an individual and for your community. You need to start changing your mindset that you're actually an asset to that community. And a lot of people, and I've seen this happen all over the country with neighborhood watches specifically, is that you've got one or two guys that are a little bit too and sometimes with the wonderful intentions, but they're a little bit too enthusiastic. And eventually they end up being arrested. And whether the arrest is right or wrong, you see other people start feeling intimidated, because now, if that could happen to them, when am I next? So I think that's the second part, is to make sure that you're balanced in the way you look, the way you approach your work, without taking away any of the excellent work neighborhood watchers do. My background in terms of neighborhood watchers, so I'm a full supporter, but be careful in the way that you present yourself. I think the third one that's critical is the just the general issue of people thinking that they can throw money at the problem. Private security, yes, is certainly important. The example years ago that Flip Base always used from Solidarity was to say that you've got the golden triangle of community safety, where you've got three sides and in a triangle, and each one is made up of an entity, one being private security, another community safety structures, and the other is state law enforcement, whether SAPS or local. And that balance is critical. I still recently, I won't say the community, but I went to quite a wealthy community that had a rural safety issue, and they literally asked me, but why can't they just pay security to come and do the patrols? And I understand. I think security can play a role in the patrols, but they shouldn't be the only ones. You need to take ownership in your community of the problem. You need to play a role. So whether it's your neighborhood watch, your CPF, or just helping to be eyes and ears for your neighborhood watch and your CPF, then you need to do that. But you can't just pay private security. Those are three of the significant ones. I mean, in terms of the state specifically, we could talk for ages. One of the biggest issues we have in terms of South African Police Service at the moment is that they so often, they announce all of these high numbers of low-level arrests, but you never see conviction.
Right. So when it comes to particularly one major myth, I think the argument done to death, but I think it needs to be repeated, is the fact that there's still people in South Africa who believe you can solve the problem by simply outlawing guns or increasing the anti-civilian firearm ownership, by increasing the laws that restrict civilian firearm ownership. Now, I know you are one of the forefront activists in support of responsible civilian firearms ownership. And as I say, these arguments have been repeated often, but I think they need to be repeated still until it really sinks in with everyone. So can you quickly just explain why civilian firearms ownership is so important if you want to get a handle on crime and push back against crime?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, if you go look in the world, just from a political point of view, over the years, any country that essentially became some kind of a dictatorship or anything with really extreme policy, whether to the left or to the right, is usually it usually sees a preamble of good lawfully armed people being disarmed. So I think what's important, it doesn't just stop normal crime, it also stops political crime. And I think that's one part that's very, very important. The state should never have the monopoly on your safety. We should never, people can be as idealist as they want, but the state must never, ever, ever have the monopoly on your safety. So that's the first part. Furthermore, people need to see lawfully armed civilians as an asset, not only amongst family and friends, but in your community. The irony of it is, and it's actually interesting, you should have a whole discussion with Lisa Schikkeling that was with us in Philippi on that day. It's very interesting that Lisa was not pro firearm at all. And now she tells everyone to get a firearm and be trained with it after that day. And the interesting thing is the large majority of people that have been victims of violent crime, if you speak with them and you ask them, how do they feel about firearms, the majority of people, regardless of their opinions of having a gun themselves, would wish, and they always share that, they wish that someone with a firearm would have come to their rescue. And that's if they survive. So I think it's very important. I would never, ever, ever say to anyone, you must have a firearm and you must make sure that as many people are armed as possible. The reason just being that people differ and some people might not be as comfortable as others. And I get that. People are different. But we should remain free to have the choice whether we would like to own a firearm for that specific purpose or not. So those are just some of them. The further principle, and it's something that I learned from Jonathan Deal, who runs the Safe Citizen campaign. He always, we spoke about it a lot, but the principle is basically that if you can defend yourself with a firearm, you are able to defend your family, and when you are able to defend your family, you're able to defend your neighbors. And when neighbors can defend each other, you start defending an entire community. And I think that's the mindset we should have, that you're actually stepping up where you would usually have to wait for someone else. You're taking ownership, and it does come with a great sense of responsibility. But I honestly think that it is of critical importance that if you are comfortable with a firearm, to be well trained and able to use it if the need be.
We actually had a comment here from Sideliner Opinions, one of the people listening live, who said if Ian was not armed, things would have turned out very ugly. And he's talking about your brush with crime as well, where that attack on your vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
Then also, Ian, I also wanted to read something else here from Richard, who said, "Aaron's." Well, he just said, he just said I had a cup here that has a farming scene on it. That is correct. But he's also been telling you, Ian, thanks, Ian, for your service will not go unnoticed. Then also, what I wanted to talk about particularly was, I remember back when you were at AfriForum, one of your main focuses was farm murders and rural crime. And I want to hear from you, particularly now in your new role. You still remain someone who is a very strong activist against rural crime and wanting to improve the rural crime scene, or what's going on currently in our rural areas. What are you currently busy with, or have you been recently busy with on that front? I'd like to hear, especially to my audience that cares very deeply about the issue.
For sure, no. So, I mean, it will always be very, very close to me. I get very angry, upset. There are many ways to describe it when people try and water it down or downplay it as just being another crime. I think they are extremely confused, and they haven't actually seen what it does to entire communities. So to me, there are a few things, Aaron. I think firstly, just from an advocacy point of view, it's very important to me that we continue to share the reasons why farm attacks are unique, why it's not just another crime. You know, the fact that politicians welcome it, some sing about it, while there are some that literally encourage it. When if we look at other violent crime, we don't see the kind of torture that, even though it's not, in my opinion, from what I've seen, the large majority of the cases, but we see torture, and we don't see that kind of torture in other violent crime that is experienced in South Africa. It's also the only profession likely that is targeted in the way that farmers are. The rural community really is under siege in some areas. I think we get carried away for all the right reasons, or very much focused on the violent elements of farm attacks. But what we sometimes don't include in the farm attack picture is what stock theft along with farm attacks does to it, and what infrastructure damage and theft does along with it. So it was quite a lengthy and a frustrating process that we went through an entire session, a few sessions with the Agriculture Committee earlier this year to eventually pass a report for the first time from Parliament that actually firstly acknowledged that a unique approach is needed to combat farm attacks, that we need specific intelligence-driven capacity to combat rural crime. And I would say probably 85, even 90% of what was in that report was really on the side of protecting the rural community and very specifically farmers. So, I mean, obviously, you'd never get everything in it that you want. That's the nature of being in a democratic system. But it really was a difficult process to go through, because you can imagine how some parties that almost celebrate farm attacks reacted when we were taking this whole issue on. I think so. From our side, I think the next step is, obviously, they've got X amount of months before they need to come and give feedback. That will likely be extended because of the chaos in the police at the moment, and the fact that the Minister of Police is on special leave, suspension, whatever they want to call it, and that there's all this other noise going on at the moment. But in short, it's that. Something that does feel more quiet at the moment. It's as though less people sometimes speak about it. So it is important that we continue to share every story and so on. I also try to sometimes post about it and so on, but to be honest, it's difficult to keep up with all the different incidents the whole time. The long and the short of it is everyone needs to speak about it.
And then outside, I know your focus is no longer just on rural crime. In your new responsibilities, you're focusing on finding solutions to crime in general. What other things are you currently busy with, or other solutions focused things or projects are taking a lot of your time and effort recently, especially in 2025?
Yeah, so they're quite a few things, but for now, a very prominent focus is actually the budget review process that lies ahead of us of the South African Police Service. Remember that my focus from a committee point of view includes the South African Police Service. It includes the Hawks. It includes the DPCI judge, IPID, as well as the Civilian Secretariat for Police. So it really is quite a large, grouping of entities that we need to zoom in on. And what we basically need to do in that process, and that's what lies ahead of us, is to see whether that budget is adequate, whether it's being managed correctly, whether it's going to fill the gaps where it's needed. And then, to be blatantly honest, it's to make sure that it's not stolen or just misappropriated somehow. Because unfortunately, and I keep saying this, is that we can talk about all the policing strategies in the world. If we don't stop the corruption, then no strategy is going to help to fight crime. So a big push for me is on a national level to keep pushing for the skills audit that became a resolution of Parliament at the end of last year. Again, the issues inside the police and specifically the ministry now will delay that, but we'll continue to push for that. And then lifestyle audits, large-scale external lifestyle audits. It was incredible to see that Public Works recently communicated that they were doing over 400 lifestyle audits at one moment. And there's no reason why the police can't do the same. So that's the kind of zoom in that we have. Obviously, the whole issue regarding Jerome Kwanazi, the Matlanga Commission and the ad hoc committee is going to fill the majority of time for the rest of the year. And I think we're going to have quite a roller coaster towards the end of 2025.
Before we start wrapping up, just two comments here from the live audience. Leeuwen Janse van Rensburg says, so I believe that even if you don't own firearms, you should still understand how a firearm works. That way, if you are in a situation, you know what to do. And then there's a question for you, Ian. Someone who tuned in a little bit later in our conversation wanted to know, good evening, gents. Are you feeling better after last month's attack, Ian?
Yeah, so I'm feeling much better. If they thought it would deter us, they made a very, very big mistake. It certainly won't. My teeth have started cracking, so I have to go back to the dentist again. The ones that they fixed now started cracking, but they said it could take about 3 months to really determine how serious the damage is. I'm not a dentist, so I don't know enough about that. But those are all small issues to fix. We'll work through that. I think the point is that we're not going to be intimidated or deterred. We're going to push through with this. And I can honestly tell you on a positive note that throughout this whole ordeal and even before that, I just keep meeting incredible people that somehow keep going inside SAPS. And that gives me a lot of hope. People that firstly have extremely strong faith, that honestly they are totally invested in their relationship with God. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they are just driven, and that they've made peace with the fact that they are in an institution with massive challenges, and that they are there to make a difference. So I'm excited about the fact that we still have so many people that try to do that. And we have to make it work. We only have one shot at this, so we need to make sure we do what we can.
Fantastic. And then my last question to you, Ian, is just how would you encourage people? How should they, if they want to make a difference themselves, but they're not involved in government, how can people make a difference in the fight against crime, even in their own humble way or in their own personal capacity?
So now I'm taking my police chair hat off and I'm saying don't vote for the ANC. But the big thing is be involved in your local structures, and people's involvement might differ. Maybe you are mostly able to put in financial assistance because of your work. You might literally not be able to have the time at all. But you need to make some kind of a contribution. So if not financial, then you need to make a physical contribution. You need to go and do a patrol in your community, or join the local radio structure, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. The point is just that you need to be involved. I after the whole incident and what happened to us, it was fascinating to me how many people that have never touched a community patrol suddenly had all this advice about what we could have, should have, would have done, and how they would have, could have, should have, approached the situation. And in the majority of cases, people mean well. So I don't detract from that, but I always think to myself that, you haven't put a foot in any form of a risky situation or a risky area. And I just think it's time that we step up in that regard. I'm not saying everyone must now charge to Philippi East, but in your own community, step up and start doing something. And I think lastly, Aaron, it's not about who you are involved with. Just make sure you are actually involved. Be part of that public debate. Be part of that public discourse, and actually take part in community activities.
Well, Ian, thank you very much for your time and insights here tonight. I really enjoyed it, found it very interesting, and I know my audience did as well. How can people find more of you and your thoughts? I reckon the best place would be X.
Yeah, so X is at Ian Cameron 23. They should find it by just going on Ian Cameron on X, and then Facebook. For some other reason, Facebook has become a far more favorable platform to communicate on, and just a lot of positive engagement, negative too, but there's engagement. Whereas X, the last few months, I see a lot of bots busy again on my platform. But nevertheless, Facebook, X, or Instagram are the ones to go for.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, everyone that tuned in as well. Thank you for your questions and for your comments. And then I'll see you again next week for another episode. Ian, have a fantastic rest of your evening and best of luck. You're doing good work.
Cheers, Aaron. Keep well. Thanks, man.
All right. And goodbye to everyone in the audience. Cheers, guys. Have a good one and God bless.